Hello, everyone. I'm Jana Garcia, Marketing Manager here at Trigger. Thank you so much for joining today's webcast. In the spotlight, 3 practical approaches to building a case for performance. With me today is Senior Performance Architect Alla Gringaus. Alla has over 2 decades of hands-on experience in the web performance space. She's held roles in front-end development and UX design at well-established technology and media brands like Time, People, The Economist, and the American Kennel Club. In just a moment, Alla will talk about how she guided 3 organizations to an understanding of performance's impact on their business objectives, from driving internal advocacy and alignment to garnering executive buy-in at the highest levels. She will discuss the techniques applied to achieve success. Also with me is Billy Hoffman, who will be moderating today's talk. Billy is a former web security hacker who was paid to find vulnerabilities and exploit front-end weaknesses in public websites and applications. That was all it took to ignite his interest and passion to pursue a career in web performance. Now, the CTO of Trigger, Mr. Hoffman, builds and innovates on solutions necessary to drive performance forward. Now, 2 housekeeping items before we get started. This presentation is being recorded. Within the next few days, we will email everyone who registered a link to download the slides and the recording. After the presentation, we will have a short question and answer session. So please submit your questions at any time during the presentation by using your Q&A feature in your GoToWebinar panel. Alla and Billy will answer as many questions as time permits. Now, over to you, Billy.
Thank you, Jana. I am so excited to be joined by Alla today. I've had the privilege of working with Alla to improve performance and experience at 3 different companies over the last decade. I can't believe it's been that long, actually. And a thing that Alla and I always saw was this gap in how we could help technical people make the business case to get the resources they need to make those fast and awesome sites that they want. And so when Alla came to me and said, hey, Billy, I'm thinking about giving this talk about how I sold performance at these different organizations, I don't think I could say yes enough times. I said, yes, everybody needs to hear that. We can do it sort of as 3 little mini talks, all inside of a single webinar where we're explaining how you were able to make that business case. So Alla, I'm so glad you're here, and thank you for giving this presentation. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Billy, for the glorious introduction. Without further ado, I'm going to dive into the first case study that I'm excited to share with everybody. So the first case study relates to my employment with Time Inc., currently Meredith. So Time Inc., once a publishing arm of Time Warner. This company has over almost 100 years history of publishing. It has a long track record of editorial achievement and business success. Time magazine actually started publishing in 1923. Then it was joined by Fortune, Life, Sports Illustrated, Money, and 1974 People magazine. So people around the world were obsessed with the celebrity stories aligned with general human lives. And some stories were focused on lifestyle of wealthy with personal details, and people could actually relate their own experiences to celebrities. But it also featured some amazing campaigns and features, such as best and worst dressed in People magazine, Person of the Year, published by Time magazine, and in the most famous swimsuit issue in Sports Illustrated. We also covered Oscar via Entertainment Weekly. So this was, Time Inc. published a lot of iconic brands. And for example, in 2014, I think the Person of the Year was Ebola fighters. It was a year of when the outbreak turned into epidemic and reached a lot of different countries and continents, Africa, Europe, and United States. And the person of the year became Ebola fighters. It was pretty amazing. So all of this and other features led to a huge traffic from all over the world. One year, People magazine online, of course, hit 1.6 billion page views a month. That was pretty amazing, but there was one little problem. After all this, after many magazines just undergone major responsive web design redesign efforts, we found that the sites were very slow, especially on mobile devices. So all this effort coincided with the whole technology revolution happening during these years. Responsive web design was widely adopted. Everybody followed leadership of Boston Globe that went responsive first in 2012, and the high performance became the de facto standard. Velocity conferences were launched not only in the United States, but throughout the world. Progressive web apps, Bitcoin, solar power, memory implants, and a lot of other innovations happened in this year. And everybody in technology knew names such as Steve Souders, Ilya Grigorik, Patrick Minan, most influential people in web performance industry. So this led us to, at that time, to a whole new mindset in conference rooms. I was very lucky and privileged having this unique position leading front-end development and performance optimization for all of the timing brands. And I heard a lot of conversation happening. How can everybody, including myself, contribute to this new mindset? What will be the next radical implications in our brands and what we can expect in the next years? So with all this in mind, we knew that the websites were still very slow. And what did we do? What we had to do, we launched UX research. So UX research showed us some aha moments, and we found something that we didn't encounter before or didn't pay attention, well, paid attention, but the mobile usage exponentially grew from day to day. So 78% of users encountered a site to being very slow to load. Half of users said that the site crashed, froze, or received an error. Quarter of users said that they thought the site was not available, and I assumed that it led to bounce rate or exit rates. 43% expected at that time for the site to load in 3 seconds or less, and 35% abandoned because the site took too long. At this point, we launched a speed project, and it was kicked off. So whenever you launch the project, you need to make it very clear to your executives, peers, and team members what is the rationale for the project. So rationale was pretty obvious. Better user experience, users come and stay on websites that perform well, and speed is one of those reasons. Improved search engine optimization. Google announced in 2010 through Google Caffeine that page speed is now included in ranking algorithms. And in general, the good speed led to less operational costs. Lighter pages cost less to serve and easier to maintain. All of this didn't come just from me saying something or sending email. It was a lot of work, I have to say, and I had to create a lot of reports. I had to compare us against the industry, what industry says about performance optimization, how it impacts SEO, and create a lot of benchmarks. So the solution that we took was incremental approach to performance, or what we call now minimum viable product. I'm very familiar with minimum viable product concept because later in my career, I also headed user experience, and minimum viable product was one of the most used terminology when I worked with the product. So in incremental steps, we had to apply performance methodology first to first 7 sites, then collect business KPIs, then measure speed before and after. And if project goes successful, we had to apply the same methodology to other websites, what we call clusters, news, and that included Money, Time Magazine, and a lot of magazine and Sports Illustrated, and lifestyle like Real Simple, Health, and many others. So we came to the point, okay, what tools we're going to use. Webpagetest.org, founded and created and managed by Patrick Meenan. Then I selected Zoom. Zoom is now for a few years acquired by Rigor. Who knew at that time that I was going to work at Zoom? And Zoom was created and founded by Billy Hoffman, who's now interviewing me, which is very interesting. And the best thing about Zoom was that it was very easy to use. It didn't require any installation, worked straight in a browser. It's still part of Rigor in our optimization feature. And it answered a lot of needs when we had to break the tasks among different teams. So the next thing was that we needed, I needed to identify the worst offenders that caused websites to slow down. You don't probably see anything new in this table. All the stuff that we manage today, not much changed. The technology changed how to approach and how to capture these metrics, but the offenders are still the same. You need to minify HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You need to reduce third-party scripts, enable caching, enable gzip, and see how ads, advertisement impacts performance, and a lot of other things. But then cost, right? So the cost for just audit, because I also involved major consultants in performance industry to help me out because it was a huge caliber of this project, was 30,000, and implementation was almost the same. But the good news about this cost distribution was that once we did audit for the first 7 sites, we could apply the same methodology to all other websites because the concept stays the same. And the next question was, okay, who pays for what? You may think, okay, I work in a small company, it doesn't apply to me. It doesn't matter. When you launch major project and product in your organization, you don't need to have 100 websites to think about cost. You can think about different departments who all have their own budget, and you need to approach it from the point of view who's going to pay for what and how to pitch all of these executives and convince them that it makes sense. So I created performance budget back then, and I have to say there was a lot of work. I have to identify and monetize every single offender that caused performance to go down. What blocks the timeline, unused CSS, why some want some website. Well, all of our websites were compressed on the server. We had absolutely brilliant, amazing team on the operations side, and we had CDN. Our CDN was Akamai, but I still had to check all of this. So it was a lot of work involved in executive pitches and executive, different presentations. It all came down to this in the end, right? And again, don't worry about seeing so many websites that I had. Think about your product, how you can think big but start small. So this whole project pended, like it was pending this particular area where you see green. So if the first 7 sites went on successful and showed good results for business KPIs, traffic, page views, returning users, engagement, and all of that, then, only then, we could propagate the same methodology to the rest of the websites. And it happened. It was extremely successful. The traffic grew every single day, and we saw obvious improvement. One of the sort of like takeaways was that it was very compelling to report to the executives statistics, which now, if you go to WPO Stats website managed by Tammy Evers, she does brilliant job reporting about success case studies, like this one, for example. Amazon found increased revenue by 1% for every 100 milliseconds of improvement, which meant that every millisecond counts. Now, another takeaway sort of like is like you need to speak the right vocabulary, what I always call Rosetta Stone. Don't try to camouflage or mask terminology. If you use this terminology among the developers or designers, make sure to mention it to executives too. Educate them, explain it to them. If you just say, oh, we don't need e-tags or we need e-tags, they don't care about what e-tag is. So they have no idea what Sprite is. But speak the language that they understand, but use the right terminology, which was extremely helpful and useful when I used Zoom, now Rigor, I'm going to repeat, because it created absolutely amazing reports explaining every single concept. And of course, every win that I was able to get was aligned with business KPIs. So I would go to Omniture after every performance metric captured and see how it affected everything else. So the top 5 takeaways from my case study from Time Inc. were the following. Performance is actually not technology. It's not a technical problem, which Tim Kudlik likes to say, and he's absolutely right. Performance is about solving a user problem. It's about the mindset. It's about performance culture. Brainstorm, evangelize, revise, and reiterate. And don't forget to align web performance metrics with your business KPIs. This is very important because it leads directly to conversion rates. Measure performance and business KPIs before and after your efforts. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to show the difference and nobody's going to value it. Establish performance budget. Know exactly what you're doing when you design the product, not aftermath, not after you launched. And of course, be the performance champion. And remember one of the most important things. I remember one year, Time magazine launched this amazing issue, and person of the year back then became you. So when you looked at this cover, this area right here where it said you actually had a mirror. So everybody who bought the magazine looked at the cover and saw themselves. So look in the mirror and say, I am performance champion. I thought that it was most appropriate cover. Don't be afraid to be performance evangelist. I did it many times. I invited people like Steve Souders, so I don't need to explain who that is. I created a lot of water coolers, performance water coolers that called Speed Matters with the help of Sergey Chernyshov, who's managing meetups, website Speed in New York. I invited people like Paul Irish, like Ilya Grigorig, Guy Pajarny, the former CTO of Akamai, and now he's managing his own security product called Swing. Jason Grigsby, the author of Progressive Web Applications, amazing book, highly recommend. My water coolers rooms were completely full, but none of this would ever happen without my amazing team. And if anybody watches this presentation, I want them to know how grateful I am for all of their effort, because we all were obsessed with web speed.
Alla, I love how you took that and talked about trying to take the technology side, but that Rosetta Stone analogy is so great about putting it in the context of a business. I think this is where a lot of technical people will fall short, is they'll say, well, but e-tag messed up. And
Right.
Business person is like, I don't understand what that means. And 2, you're telling me you want to not make a new feature for the site for something that I don't understand. But what you were able to do there was get it in the frame of, hey, these images being bad on this site, it's impacting us in this way. And oh, by the way, that's going to be on the the sexiest person in the U.S. or man in America or whatever.
Right.
We're going to get
Man.
6 billion views or whatever. I can't even imagine 1.6 billion page views. That's insane.
Totally insane.
How did you, I'm also really interested, could you talk just for another minute about that kind of building the culture? Because you talked about that at the end of like, you can be a performance evangelist, but bringing in maybe some outside people to sort of help also explain concepts or building these roundtables. So you were like, you weren't having to be the only evangelist. You were like educating and creating like more Allahs inside of time to be spreading that message. Talk to us a little bit about how you did that.
Of course. So, like I said in my talk before, I did a lot of pitches, but it started from the blank page when Fran Hauser, the president of entertainment cluster, who managed at the top people.com, called me into her office and she said, "Allah, why the page is blank?" And there was the start of the performance project. And after multiple pitches and proof of concept, my biggest win was that it wasn't me who called Steve Souders to bring him in. It was president of Time Inc., Ned Desmond, who made the call. And Steve Souders was a huge help, helping me guide the performance culture. And then I started attracting all other leaders in performance industry.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Let's move on to the next one and talk about The Economist.
Absolutely. All right. I have my Scrum clock that I'm putting on for a little bit of time so that I watch time, because I can talk about The Economist forever. So how do you guys like the cover that I found? It's amazing, right? Globalization. I thought I couldn't find any like more appropriate cover for this talk. It's amazing. So Economist is my favorite brand of all, I have to say. I also like Time as well, but Economist is certainly the favorite. Economist is where I also headed their front end development for the whole brand and user experience as well. So Economist is headquartered in London, UK. It has offices and people across the globe and valued by its customers for its world-class insights and rigorous analysis and provocative thought leadership. So although The Economist is published weekly in magazine format, it is called newspaper because it covers news as well as opinion and works to a newspaper deadline. It's going to press weekly everywhere in Europe, Asia, and the United States. This is the editorial room, what we call newsroom. You would not believe it, but I took this picture and it still exists on the website. I took this picture. So I was invited in a newsroom in a editorial brainstorms to understand how the news getting developed and how they get online and what's the most important thing. And what I heard was that all these covers that you see, people need to subscribe to. But of course, we spoke about online subscription. And I started managing performance and see what's going to happen if I measure performance, since I'm managing front end development and user experience. It's all in my hands. So I'm not going to show. Let me go back. Maybe I'm not going to show the entire movie, but I used webpagetest.org to measure the performance, and I almost fell off my chair. The homepage took almost 40 seconds to load, and when I saw the results, it was 9 megabytes, you can imagine, plus latency, and almost 600 requests on fastest cable connection. It was real disaster. At some point, the page went back to blank, and then it took 40 seconds to show. And I started looking into the matrix, right? So many pages would only start render in 5 seconds. And remember 3 seconds concept? At that point, there was a lot of bailout read. If not for The Economist's reputation, most people would just exit this page. So I used all of the matrix. We didn't have Lighthouse, right, back then. We didn't have Rigor. We didn't have Speed Curve or other amazing tools that help us measure performance using matrix. But I used the regular classic matrix. It doesn't matter. And I still found like, okay, what can we do to reduce bytes? What can we do to reduce third-party scripts? this is all real. Like all this I found on Economist.com. So don't forget that I had to talk Rosetta Stone. So when I spoke with the executives, showing them this was not enough. They're like, okay, all right, we need all of this. And then you show the content and you say, okay, this is your page, this is your content. And what's going on here? You have Omniture here, Optimizely here, you have million other scripts here, Brightcove, extremely slow, social network, you have advertisement, you have geolocation, and 80 more scripts. So when I pitched our executives, which honestly, I have to be frank, not very hard. They super smart. All of the executives at The Economist are hands-on. They take time to understand all the concepts. But I had to show them how third-party impacts performance and what a dramatic impact it has on business KPIs, and what's the hidden cost that significantly exceeds the expectations and included markup. So there was a very interesting moment when I did it at The Economist, and the project went extremely successful. But before I move on, let's do a little bit of exercise. So it's time for poll one. Jana, if you'd like, you can trigger poll right now. I want you to answer just a couple of questions.
Excellent. Here we go. So which performance metrics help you determine whether enough content rendered for the users to start engaging with it? And Alla, while our attendees answer that, I just wanted to say I love that view of a website where you have people take sort of a screenshot of maybe not even your above the fold content, but the whole page, and then just start highlighting that's third party. Oh, look, that's an ad widget. Oh, look, that's a chat widget. I think a lot of it, I find that helps people really communicate how much of their content actually is third party content. Did you make that in places besides The Economist? Have you ever used that view in another company?
Yes, actually, yes, I used it in every single company. But
we had some people come in. So it looks like 45% of people said first meaningful paint.
Let's see. So what performance metrics? Yes, this is great. This is indeed the right answer. First meaningful paint. So when any type of content becomes visible on a screen, users feel like they may start engaging with content pretty soon. So it increases the tolerance level. Awesome job, guys. So after I proved the concept with the homepage and a few other pages, I went on to subscription, and we found out that web page test showed that subscription page failed on all grades, and we started with subscription page. I also collected statistics from HTTP archive, such as, for example, The Economist homepage size was almost 5 megs, and 346 object requests on average, where the top 1,000 sites homepage average was 1.5 megabytes and only 109 object requests. So we kind of used it to artificially create performance budget just to be better than others. And I always use the contrast method, right? The contrast method is very impactful. For example, I collected all of the images from one page, and the total size of kilobytes was 1 megabyte. After optimization, it was 250 kilobytes. 750 kilobytes can cost you 3 seconds or 2 seconds to pay. It's really, really bad. So when I showed this and people didn't see any change in quality, that was extremely impactful. I also got this image from theeconomist.com, and I thought that it was mostly appropriate. Okay, your train may never come, which means that you need to improve performance. Otherwise, you're going to impact your business bottom line. So one of the biggest changes, like when I was speaking about revolution, those years, was responsive web design. It's still all of these responsive web design issues are still you can still see them in many brands, because you need to keep in mind that responsive layout should adapt and change for a lot of different screens, because users expect similar experience regardless of the device they're using. Therefore, a person who visits your site and it's not optimized for their machine, be it whatever it is, right? There's a good chance that they will never end up buying anything from you, subscribing, and they're gonna end up leaving and not come back. So the page load speed became the of the essence for the upcoming responsive web design project that I kicked off actually. And I worked rigorously with my team and all other teams to deliver the main concept coined by Luke Wroblewski, mobile first, right? So we would start design from a smallest basic mobile design for smallest basic mobile device, and then we would move on to small device, medium, and large. Of course, medium was tablet, small you can consider like iPhone, and that's how we started. Remember MVP, minimum viable product. But the thing is that when you think about how you're going to squeeze content on a smallest device, when you propagate it to larger devices, you already keep in mind, you don't try to put into your content as much as possible. You do it the other way around, and that's how you improve speed. So the rationale for this project was practically almost the same as I used for Time Inc., because I really was fully equipped with a lot of methods for performance optimization, and I repurposed a lot of methodology, concepts, and techniques when I went on to the next brand. So it was not too hard at this point. So people have increasingly high expectations, and even higher than ever before, when it comes to surfing online. And websites that take too long to load result in negative brand perception, diminish goodwill, and have significant impact on loss in overall traffic. The same, the same methodology that I used at Time Inc. So when you do it once, you can always repurpose it and tweak it by adding new technologies and new methods. Better user experience overall, better SEO, less operational cost, and so forth. And again, I love my favorite, the Economist ads, like great think, I forgot, but one of them is a goal is a dream, but it has a deadline, right? A goal is a dream with a deadline. So don't forget about deadlines when you apply all of this and more techniques, when you plan everything. Use the concept of divide and conquer. Like I said, at The Economist, again, Billy traveled with me all over because I loved working with Zoom product, and I loved working with Billy. And again, we would create dashboards and spread, divide it and spread all of the tasks among designers, operations, developers. And it was very easy to approach, because when everybody's responsible for everything, nobody's responsible for nothing, for anything, right? So when you break it down and you say, okay, this is design task, you're responsible for this, it's a lot easier to address and tackle. And of course, one of the methods that I brought in was ROM, even back then. So sites like SpeedCurve, or a lot of sites that provide right now ROM methodology didn't exist back then in a lot of capacities. But I found this product called AlertSite, owned by SmartBear now, but it provided a real user measurement. And it was also epiphany moment when we saw, oh, okay, how would our users experience in different locations around the globe. And that's how we discovered the real user experience. That was pretty amazing. So AlertSite ROM plus Zoom, which helped me to divide and distribute the tasks together, was a huge success. one of the sort of like takeaways that I always recommend, remember the contrast methodology. When you talk about benchmark, and this also came from alert side Smart Bear, when you say, you know, like, hey, we're the best, our content is the best, but when you look at the bottom of the page and you see Economist, user experience, the response takes longer than any of your competitors, that's extremely compelling, and that triggers investment into performance right away, trust me. So going for fast forward, the Economist eventually launched amazing, absolutely amazing website. The designers were brilliant, the developers amazing, the whole organization is super smart. So we launched the responsive design. It was amazing, and even industry, different publishing companies noticed that, and they you know noticed that 80%, the site that was launched was 80% faster than it loaded 80% faster than it did before the redesign. So that alone was a huge win. The results was everything that I told you about: reduced bounce rate, reduced exit rate, increased traffic, better user experience, SEO. All of this and a lot more led to increase in subscription. And at that point, just like what I did at Time Inc., when I measured with the help of Fastly, by the way, as well, I reached out to Fastly and I brought them to help us with the to be our CDN. And when I managed all this project and I reported about business KPIs, we triggered officially performance project throughout the whole, like for the whole entire brand. So what are the top takeaways? Get support from the executive office as usual, right? Speak Rosetta Stone. Have shared knowledge, right? Vocabulary. Think big but start small. Minimum viable product. Full team collaboration. Always start with business metrics. Measure before and after. And just like I said before, act like a champion of what you're passionate about. And again, I found this amazing like street ad of The Economist shape the world.
What is the best timing metric that most closely correlates to a business metric like conversion rate? And while our attendees answer, you had something on that really cool slide on the takeaways where you talked about trying to incorporate some of this into the development process at The Economist. Talk to us a little bit about that. What did you mean by trying to incorporate sort of UX testing and performance testing as part of the dev process? How did you do that?
Well, Economist is an extremely innovative company. It's we had agile methodology in place, and we used Scrum. We had Scrum Master. So once the project was approved, everybody reported about performance in a stand-up meeting every single day when the product head of product, Robin Raven, and even Tom Standage, the biggest figure, one of the biggest figures in my mind in technology journalism, who was the product stakeholder, the main one. All the developers, designers were reporting about their, success stories on performance on a daily basis. And then when we had show and tell in a 2-week sprint period, we were reporting, okay, what we were able to accomplish. And when you have this like small chunks of accomplishment, small wins, it always leads to big wins. So when you incorporate performance into development life cycle, it becomes a lot easier than like this project doesn't seem so big and impossible. It becomes very possible and very feasible to tackle all the performance issues.
Yeah, I love the idea about sort of here's the progress I've made on performance being part of a daily like Scrum stand up. I think more websites would be faster if people did that. That's pretty awesome.
Exactly.
All right, and we've got the results of our poll in. It looks like we've got a pretty smart audience because we had 62% of people talking about Touch Interactive.
Next time I'm gonna come up with harder questions, I swear. Yes, absolutely, guys. Good job. It's time to interactive. The metric time to interactive marks the point at which your application is both visually rendered and capable of reliably responding to user input. And that's what makes it like the best timing metric that closely correlates to conversion rate. Okay, let's move on. I put my Scrum clock to the next 10 minutes, and let's move on to the American Kennel Club. Like I said, I was, maybe that's what I always elected when I was moving to the next project. I wanted to do something, you know, in companies that, you know, to develop something, to be agent of change. And it was, of course, challenging, but I love to make this change in large companies. And AKC, American Kennel Club, is going to celebrate 135 years this year. It's absolutely amazing nonprofit with a lot of purpose for animals. And I was privileged to be director of not only creative director, but also director of user experience design at the American Kennel Club. So with my technical background, it was very useful to pitch this time the executives. So of course I was doing a lot of UX research, and I started collecting and noticed that more and more people complain about the page load. So at that point, I used Usabilla, highly recommend, amazing UX research tool. So Usabilla helped me to identify that a lot of people complain about page load. People say, I have to wait and wait and wait until the page will show anything from my iPhone. And as you can see, Usabilla shows you the average score of mood for the people. So people were extremely unhappy, but most of the comments included the page load. So what I did, I went to my secret weapon, the one of the most important concepts in UX design, and there was personas, right? Because I developed performance in collaboration with the entire entire team of stakeholders from every single team in a company, from product, from advertisement, from management, from like everybody participated, and we identified the major personas which reflected on our audience. So what I found when I looked into personas clusters and I looked into Google Analytics to see where these people are, I found that most of the dog owners and dog constituents, dog professionals, they live outside of large cities, which meant, because not a lot of buildings allowed to have the dog, and of course the breeders need to have a lot of dogs, so they lived in rural areas. So the broad connection was not that great, broadband connection. Actually, it was mostly a narrowband than broadband. So the speed of internet was a lot worse for our users than regular users. I also used techniques like Google has behavior flow, when you can capture where people go from one page to another, and just to monitor the user journey. And fast forward, I can talk for hours about this experience, but we don't have too much time, but you understand the concept. After all of this research that I performed with using a lot of different techniques, I started the new project, redesign of subscription page, subscription to newsletter page. Remember my methodology, MVP, right? Think big, but start small. So if you prove concept for one page, then you can do it for all other pages. And the reason I moved from gigantic Time Inc. with a lot of brands, then to one very large brand, Economist, and then to this brand, which is smaller than the Economist, but with a huge impact in the world, still, I use, keep in mind that I use the same methodologies. So I repeat the same exact things, right? But of course, I tie it to business strategies. So I triggered redesign. My team redesigned the whole subscription to newsletter page. We applied all of the performance techniques thanks to our developers, optimized images. I used Rigor already because Rigor acquired Zoom, but I used exactly the same methodology that I used with Zoom using Rigor. I spreaded all the tasks between the teams. Designers optimized the images, developers focused on critical rendering path. We applied lazy loading, and we applied resource hints, preload, prefetch, and things like that. Fonts for JavaScript. This is just to say the least, right? It was a lot more work done. And every time after every sprint, we launch something, I would go back and monitor what's going on with the traffic, with page views, with average time spent on site, right? On page. What's the bounce rate? What's the exit rate? Everything was improved, absolutely everything. So getting back, Billy, to your question, like how I did it with developers, because developers mostly kind of focus, okay, JavaScript, Angular, React, this is amazing, right? But you always need to think about the very first concept when I started this talk. Performance is not technical problem. Like I said, like Tim Kudlik says, performance is performance culture problem. It's a mindset. So if you put performance to the very end, after you launch, it's very expensive to reverse engineer your entire effort and make it fast. It actually costs you a lot more. But if you build performance in a almost like in a product discovery phase or in design, then it's a lot easier to manage performance and launch good performing website. It's a lot easier to tweak performance than to reverse engineer it. And that was, I think, the biggest key for the American Kennel Club. So another round of customer feedback using usability, using Google Analytics and UX research. We tested results. You see, this is real picture. Okay, it's not real, I photoshopped it, but that's exactly what happened. We tested results against performance, like how the website loaded on mobile, what rigor showed us, what are the KPIs, how they improved. And in the end of the day, what happened? It was just one small subscribe to newsletter page, right? But what it led to, people started subscribing to newsletters. And when people get all of these amazing newsletters, they click and way it goes, conversion rate, right? So this is like different, yeah, front doors, but you don't forget about all the back doors. Start small, but big thing, think big. So the case study showed that the mood of the users exponentially improved. They went from being extremely unhappy to being pretty happy. You know, I'm not saying very happy, but pretty happy. But look at that. 25 items were loved, not just liked. And of course, we have absolutely amazing product team and executive team. When we launched the website, we measured everything, every single step, and we found that all business KPIs went up, went up, went up. Look at Puppy Search. It went from August to January, and the end result, which I already used Rigor, right? Rigor is amazing. There are other tools like Speed Curve and not, like I say, a lot, not a lot, but I of course highly recommend Rigor. So we noticed a huge improvement in all of the performance metrics. And maybe time to interactive definitely need to be improved to be less than 5 seconds on 3G connection and less than 2 seconds on broadband. But like I said, performance is not one-time shot. It's not one project be done and leave. It's ongoing effort. That's why everybody needs to manage performance. And now, as a lot of brands that I work with, and my whole, like our whole team at Rigor works with on a daily basis, we now equipped with this amazing reports that come from Rigor. Look at this, like all of this, it's so much easier to talk to the executives when you can generate, you can visually generate all of this reports showing the performance improvement. And like I did with other brands, the top 6 takeaways, almost all of them, repeat again, get buy-in from the executives, right? Maintain performance budget. Start small, but think big. Start with MVP. Build performance metrics into design and development life cycle, not aftermath. Factor load speed into revenue goals. And Be the champion, the performance champion. I think I'm gonna get in trouble from dog professionals for keeping these dogs, for showing the picture with the dog covered face, because it's not supposed to be here. But I promise, if you watch it, I'm gonna fix it. But be the champion.
Ala, hold on. I have to ask a question that I'm sure everybody attending this is. Did you actually have a dashboard called like Puppy Search on a big TV at AKC?
Of course, puppy search is a huge effort. We have marketplace, yeah, marketplace where people come to the most respected and valued by many dog lovers website, AKC, and that's where they search for puppies. Yeah, that's a huge thing.
Instead of being a bar chart, though, it really should be like number of little like happy puppy faces or something. Should be the measurement bars for that. I think we're ready for our third and final poll here. So let's kick it off. So we'll see what people say. What performance metric best corresponds with poor performance? It's what I like, Ala, is how whether it was a company with a lot of brands, the Economist with just one big brand, or an organization like AKC that has such an important mission, that in all these different companies it's still the same approach, because that shows that it's not sort of a one-off thing. It's really a repeatable process that you've been able to apply, but also our attendees are going to be able to apply regardless of where they are.
Exactly. Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Billy. And, this, everything that I shared today about speaking Rosetta Stone and getting buy-in from the executives, pitching, evangelizing, goes to reducing the misconceptions, right? So when people ask you, okay, which metric I need to label as page load, right? But I'm not going to give you the answer before we see the poll results.
Yes, actually, let's go ahead. We'll close this and share the results. All right, Ala, it's a pretty close field. What's the right answer?
Yeah, I know. This is very confusing, and that's why you need to subscribe. You need to subscribe to Rigor and work with me for faster as a service. I'll help you. So the correct answer, only quarter of our amazing attendees answered it right, none of the above. Why? Because poor performance can happen at any time, not just during the load. Users as well as developers should care about the entirety of the UX, entire user experience. Not one single metric can reflect on poor performance. It's combination of them, and it depends on your business objectives.
I totally agree. In fact, what I really like to do is you almost can look at the metrics, and which metric is the one that is high and is poor performance gives you an insight into where your problem may be. I've seen organizations, they look at onload and they say, hooray, onload's great, I'm doing great. But
Right.
then you look at time to interactive and you realize that there's a ton of third-party JavaScript that's getting downloaded. Just because the site loaded and there's a call to action button, you click it and nothing is happening. Exactly. Or people really care about their above the fold, their visually complete metric, but then you realize that actually maybe their core content was lower on the page, and actually it wasn't yet available. So it's situational, but it's really any of these metrics. There isn't sort of one that you should just say, oh, this is the best, and as long as this is good, then nothing else matters.
Exactly. A lot of executives actually that I work with ask me, the same question. Ala, give us one single metric that we can qualify for page load to report to the top executive office. And I'm always at low, I'm always at confused. Okay, what should I say? There is not one single metric. It's user experience. But that's why Lighthouse launched only a few. So you need to look at them as combination of metrics.
Yeah, totally. Excellent. Well, Ala, thank you so much. We're going to be going into QA in here in just a second. So everyone, this is go ahead and start using the features of GoToMeeting to start asking your questions now, and our amazing moderator Jana will start collecting them. But just a quick word about Rigor. Actually, I don't even know if I need to say this. Like, Ala was just doing such a great job. singing our praises all over the place. So that's always a great thing to have. But yeah, so Rigor is it's a cloud-based web performance solution designed to help teams find, fix, and prevent those speed and user experience issues that are impacting your site and your API. And that's really something Alla kept iterating over and over again. It's not about sort of a one-time audit that you just do. It's really something that you want to make part of your process. And so that's really what we've tried to do with Rigor. Have those integrations so that, hey, when you quickly detect an issue, create a defect in Jira for your team, or let's push some of those metrics into Datadog so we can do what Alla was just saying, overlay those business metrics with the performance metrics. You want to get them into maybe a centralized reporting system or a graphing system.
Right.
And Rigor makes it really easy to do.
You're absolutely right. Once you build it into development lifecycle, it's a lot easier to do all of these things that you just mentioned. Because when you look at the performance aftermath, you have very little room to apply all of these methodologies.
Well, you and I think this, but then again, we've also had the lovely opportunity to do this for a decade together. And those screenshots were certainly taking me back to probably some code that I should have done a better job writing at times. But you know what, for everybody who's here, if you can click to the next slide, we have an easy way for people to get started. They can go to rigor.com/free and just get a free, quick web performance report. It's going to identify some top optimizations they can do and also give them some great feedback about their overall performance of the site. But with that, let's go on over into our Q&A. So everyone, go ahead, please answer in your questions through the GoToMeeting. While we're waiting on that, I'll kick one off, Alla. So no one ever says this is the best metric, because there isn't a best metric. But when you're trying to set those sort of initial expectations for here's how I think the business is going to improve, like we're going to start small, we're just going to do this one thing. How do you sort of make expectations or set estimates about how much benefit there will be to the business for a given project? Like once you've done one, it's easy to do another one because you can look back at that first example. But I bet a lot of our attendees are wondering for that initial one and they get started, how do they make those estimates of what the impact will be?
Well, there are a lot of different methods and methodologies to do this, but one of the most impactful ones is that, okay, let's say you're not yet Rigor customer, you're not yet SpeedCurve customer or others. So, but you have web page tests and you have Lighthouse. Compare yourself against others and absolutely make sure that in your pitches you show the results. You always think that, okay, our brand is the best, has the best content, has the best product. But also think about business, be a business person. Think about what's your bounce rate, what's your exit rate, and try to demystify and deconstruct what impacts the bounce rate and what's going to happen if you improve your performance. So in this case, like I said, start small, take one page, be the initiator of that, talk to developers, start this project, and if it goes successful, you're going to get buy-in. I can guarantee that.
Excellent. Yeah, and actually, I would almost add on. I love that chart that you showed, or that graph when you were talking about the Economist, and you had the Economist at the bottom, and the bars were kind of going left and right.
That was it, right. Once I showed that, it was like, okay, when we're gonna start project tomorrow? I'm like, come on, give me a little bit of time.
Yes, and actually I think that's something great, whether you're using a commercial tool like Rigor or even a great open source tool like Web Page Test. That's one of the great things about web performances is that all of you and your competitors are online. Like you can't hide. Everyone is going to know how much you suck or how awesome you are. And so it's really easy to go and say, all right, well, here's the Economist, here's how fast it is. Let's go test a couple of the competitors and see fast they are and show that chart internally to get that buy-in.
Yep, absolutely. Do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. Let's get started. So Carlos asks, how do you reduce an excessive DOM size without sacrificing SEO or putting too much weight into features by JavaScript?
Sure. So, for example, one of the interesting kind of like, I'm going to warn you, tricky questions. I think it was, I saw it in a book, Design for Performance. Like the question is, okay, what do you use? What format of the image you use to design, to develop the button, right? The buy button. And do you use PNG? Do you use JPEG? Or do you use GIF? And people were kind of like, okay, GIF, JPEG, or PNG, but the answer is none of the above. You use CSS. Why would you use an image to create a button? These days, you can use CSS3 to have a button. And sometimes you have a complete overload, unnecessary JavaScript. So the key to reduce your DOM, take advantage of amazing HTML5 features or CSS3, and use tools like to detect unused CSS or unused JavaScript. You don't need to launch all of it on every single page. Split it and make sure that you address critical rendering path first. And by splitting this code and only providing the code on pages that is necessary to be on that page is the key to this, is the answer to this question.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you. And we have time for a couple more questions if people want to get those in. Another one to you. You know, you've talked about these three different companies and sort of kind of running the same sort of approach and process in each one. I'm interested. What do you think is sort of your most rewarding experience, or what were you most proud of from a performance initiative you did in your career?
I think the proudest moment of all was that even though I changed my career path a lot, I was like I said, front-end developer, then head front-end development, then I decided to go into UX to address UX problems. So I was kind of switching back and forth, but I was doing performance all the time, right? And finally, when I passed all the interviews, a lot of interviews to join Rigor, and I was accepted, that was the biggest win for me, because I knew enough to be accepted by the performance company. So I knew, like, to be accepted by the people who work in performance, and for me it was the most rewarding experience. But to be, not so personal, my biggest reward was that every time when we optimized the website or feature or product, and every time we would create reports from analytics, and without making any changes in third parties or design, when we measured pure performance before and after, that was the most rewarding experience. That meant that my sleepless nights, my blood and tear and sweat didn't go for nothing.
Yes, we've all had a lot of those sleepless nights too on those big projects. We've got another question in here, which actually I love that this question got asked. Which web technology has a better performance, using a single page app framework, a server-side rendering, or a combination of the both?
My favorite answer, it depends, right? Because you can have single page app that performs poorly, and you can have all others that, you can have a really big, just classical traditional page that performs amazing. Look at Smashing Magazine pages. It depends how you apply performance techniques. But as long as you keep in mind progressive applications, progressive web app, and for that I recommend a lot of different things, like, but one of my favorite books is Jason Krigsby's book, Progressive Web App. Like, if you read it, that almost guarantees you to be faster.
Yeah, the reason I love this question is that I think it's easy to get caught up in the web technology trend, and certainly with JavaScript, as we joke, it's the JavaScript framework of the century of the week, because
Right.
no one will be using that in a week. I've seen, I'll kind of echo you, Ala. It depends in the sense that I've
It
seen
depends.
terrible, horrible, bloated applications written in every single type of framework you've imagined. And I've seen incredibly fast, amazing applications written in everything. So everyone who's like,
Right.
oh, it's got all these single page apps and it's got to be JavaScript and handlebars and blah, blah, blah. I've seen server-side rendered applications smoke any modern JavaScript application. I've
Right.
also seen server-side rendered applications that have been terrible, and even if you're loading 3 megs of content of JavaScript, the JavaScript is still faster. So I think it is step back from the technology and look at what are the metrics, measure the metrics, and optimize to make the metrics faster. Because you can be fast and slow regardless of what you're using.
Right. But announce word metrics a lot less than you say word user. Think of user first.
Yes, I love that. Think of users first. All right, we're going to lightning round these last couple ones. We've got one here. How do you convince a user or how do you convince the developer to work on the technical component that's causing the performance issue, like the CSS or the JavaScript?
So first of all, you need to, if you have any influence over it, you need to be a advocate for design systems. So when you have design systems, for example, at the American Kennel Club, we use Fractal, right? So when you work with different components, it's easier, like, you know, the concept divide and conquer. It's easier to manage performance budget for one component than for the overall entire page. So every component, if it has if you bake performance into component development, and you know what content you're gonna use for particular components, including JavaScript frameworks, do you really need to use so many JavaScript libraries or a large JavaScript library? Or sometimes for certain features, you can go plain vanilla JavaScript. Do you really need to use all of this? So the more you simplify components, if you use design systems, the more it's going to be repurposed throughout your whole product. But you need to, like I said, you need to sit down and talk. You need to meet together. You need to brainstorm it and evangelize it.
That's awesome. I love that collaborative approach to it. Ala, we still have a couple extra questions, but we're right at the end of the time. So I would encourage all of the attendees, if you have any questions, you can see on the slide share right there. There's Ala's email address. She's also very active on Twitter. There's a great web performance community at Twitter. And you're at A Gringos on Twitter as well, right, Ala?
Yes, I am. Yep.
Excellent. And anybody who asked a question in the GoToMeeting panel that we weren't able to get to, we'll be able to reach out to you also directly at the end or after the webinar is over. And with that, I'll turn things over to Jana.
Thank you so much. And that is our time today. Thank you all for joining us, and a very special thank you to Ala and Billy for sharing their insights. Feel free to contact us anytime with any additional questions. Now, remember to watch your inbox for a link to download the slides and the recording of today's webcast. If you found today's presentation insightful, please subscribe to our blog for a deep dive into industry trends and best practices. And don't forget to take advantage of our free web performance report. It will give you insight into the current health of your website and a glimpse of what Rigor can offer. Again, thank you so much for attending and have a great day.
Thank you so much for hosting me. Thank you guys for attending.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.